The Talmud tells the following story. Rabbi Joshua ben Levi, while meditating near the tomb of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, was visited by the prophet Elijah. "When will the Messiah come?" asked Joshua. "Ask him," replied the prophet. "The Messiah is at the gates of Rome, sitting among the poor, the sick, and wretched. Like them, he changes the bindings of his wounds, but does so one wound at a time in order to be ready at a moment's notice." For as long as people have been searching for God, God has been showing up incognito among the poor and the sick, under cover of darkness, in the guise of the stranger and the strange, beyond the edges of our peripheral vision. The people of God have only just been delivered from bondage. The people of God have only just been delivered from bondage in Egypt when the complaining starts. "I'm so hungry, I just wish the Lord had killed us when we were still in slavery. At least the food was good and we had enough of it." The word complaining shows up 7 times in 13 verses, every other line. "What are we," cry Moses and Aaron, "that you complain against us? Take it up with God." Then the Lord speaks, promising to rain down bread from heaven. Why? So the people will know that this God who delivered them from their past can also create for them a future. This God who destroys the powers that be can also create out of nothing. This God who liberates also provides, and not just once, but every day. God is giving them a shape to their entire week. 6 days you're to gather food. On the 6th day, gather twice as much. On the 7th day, gather nothing at all. God is building a relationship with them. Wake up in the morning and I'm going to feed you. A meal as an expression of love and trust, like a mom feeding her kids breakfast before they head off to school. And like a mom feeding her kids, rejection and lack of recognition is a constant battle. What is it? It's good, you'll like it. Doesn't look good, it looks weird. It's the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. It looks gross. Only human beings can complain about being starving, get served miraculous bread in the middle of the desert, then complain about the bread. In recognition of this fundamental human propensity for complaining, we've actually set up a new email address here at the church specifically for complaints. god@stclementsto.ca, and the account will not be monitored. The word we know as manna sounds like the Hebrew for "what is it?" And perhaps there's no better shorthand for our relationship with the Creator. Recognition of God's provision coming out of our mouths from the breakfast table framed as a question. What is it? The people of God may not like it, and the practice of gathering it daily may seem tedious, yet it keeps them alive in the wilderness for 40 years. Before the pandemic, parishioners at St. Clement's used to bake fresh bread for our Sunday celebration of communion. The only time we served wafers was at major festivals like Christmas and Easter. At one such festival, when my son was much younger, he came to the front expecting to receive a small piece of fresh baked bread. Instead, my son stepped forward in the communion line, and I placed the thin wafer into his palm, and he looked at it strangely as if to say, "What is it?" And then he turned to my wife and said, "Crackers?" "It's good, you eat it." He placed it on his lips with a strange expression and walked away. As a priest, I occasionally hear people comment that they've been in church perhaps week after week for decades, yet can only remember a small handful of sermons. There's often a ghost critique here, like, if I were a better preacher, people would remember. Until one day, a Christian who's wiser than I said, "Yes, that may be true." And he'd eaten 3 meals a day for decades now, yet could only remember a small handful of them. But each one nourished him in some way and kept him alive for another day. Give us this day our daily bread. Sometimes we expect faith to feel more like a mountaintop or a revelation or a steady reassurance that we're on the right track, or at least not on the wrong one. But often it's more humble than that. That's why God has given us sacraments. One of my favorite definitions of the sacraments is the place where God has promised to meet us. Not one of them is on the mountaintop or the place of blinding light. The meetups are rather ordinary, mundane, and easily missed. A piece of bread and a sip of wine. What is it? God touching our lips with what we need for today. The waters of baptism. What is it? God leading us through the waters of the Red Sea. On one side is Pharaoh's army and the pyramids of death, and on the other, freedom and a promised land we've never been to but desperately want to believe is there. And you cannot get there by going over, around, or under, but only through. The Talmud teaches us that to find the Messiah, we must search not high and low, just low. For the Messiah is wounded as we are and in creaturely form, yet always ready to leap up to heal. Dirty and disheveled, yet washing us clean in the waters of baptism. Broken and spent, yet always coming to us as wholeness and fullness. Hungry, yet coming to us as the bread of life. Amen.